Good evening, everyone. I had to change the coordinates for my Zoom session, so I hope I didn't leave my entire panel behind. But it is entirely possible that that is the case. And so what I am going to do is I'm going to start and just go ahead through the evening anyway, and hope that some of my friends catch up with me at some point, because I found out that I can do everything we've been doing on the webinars. We can do those all on here on meetings, and so can everybody hear me? I hope so. Please let me know on the Zoom chat, because I don't have anybody here to tell me that I'm hearable. Let's see. I guess I can see if yep, okay, my microphone seems to be working. And so let's just go for it, because time's a wasting. And so we've been reading about the monopersonality the last couple of weeks. And so now we're going to be talking about the dissolution of the monopersonality. And I hope that someone will say hello on YouTube chat. Anyway, what's this? All right. I'm going to just put a note on the chat. Can anybody hear me? Okay. All right. I'm assuming the broadcast is going on fine as normal. And, there's a few little bells and whistles here that are a little different from the way we've been doing our Zooms in the past, our webinars. And so we will go on. All right. So we're working with this book tonight, 2 essays on analytical psychology. We're up to paragraph 398. We're very close to getting into a new area. And so here goes. Thus, the dissolution of the monopersonality, though conscious assimilation of its contents. Let me reread that. Thus, the dissolution of the monopersonality through conscious assimilation of its contents leads us to a natural route back to ourselves as an actual living something, poised between two pictures and their darkly discerned potencies. This something is strange to us and yet so near, wholly ourselves and yet unknowable, a virtual center of so mysterious a constitution that it can claim anything, kinship with beasts and gods, with crystals and with stars, without moving us to wonder, without even exciting our disapprobation. This something claims all that and more, and having nothing in our hands that could fairly be opposed to these claims, it is surely wiser to listen to this voice. And so what Dr. Jung is referring to here is what we in Jungian psychology always refer to as the voice of the self. And this was sort of an early intimation of it because he was writing this about 100 years ago. And so we know that we're alive physically here, and we know that there's something else, and we're hung between those things. And we don't know what makes us go, what makes our body operate, how does our body do any of the functions that it does on a normal basis. And we're not sure of that. And so we have to, what Dr. Jung does is he calls it the self. So let me go on. So paragraph 399. I've called this center the self. Intellectually, the self is no more than a psychological concept, a construct that serves to express an unknowable essence, which we cannot grasp as such, since by definition it transcends our powers of comprehension. It might equally well be called the God within us. The beginnings of our whole psychic life seem to be inextricably rooted in this point, and all our highest and ultimate purposes seem to be striving toward it. This paradox is unavoidable, as always, when we try to define something that lies beyond the bourne of our understandings. And so we're trying to describe something that's deep inside us that causes us to become who we are, quite simply. And, this is the path of individuation. It's the path of how an acorn becomes an oak tree. An acorn has everything in it it needs to become an oak tree, except maybe some energy source, water and energy source, but it knows how to grow itself up to be a mighty oak tree. And so the point is that we're all like that. And as human beings, we know how to become human beings, or our psyche does, our self knows. And it goes ahead and does it either consciously or unconsciously. So we can try to direct it. We can treat it like a bonsai tree and try to direct the way the limbs go or something like that, or reduce our size maybe by doing various things. Who knows what you might do. But the fact is that our body will go ahead and do it no matter what. Our body replaces essentially all of the cells of our body, and maybe over 90% anyway, every 7 years. And we don't consciously take any part in that. That is just done automatically by our psyche. And that is the self that is emerging. But the self emerges in both conscious and unconscious ways. And so yourself is always telling you what it thinks you need to know to succeed. And so this is what Dr. Jung is talking about in this paragraph. And I hope someone will send me a chat on YouTube so that I can know that you can hear me. And I'm going to go on here. Okay, paragraph 400. I hope it has become sufficiently clear to the attentive reader that the self has as much to do with the ego as the sun with the earth. They are not interchangeable, nor does it imply a deification of man or a dethronement of God. What is beyond our understanding is in any case beyond its reach. When therefore we make use of the concept of a God, we're simply formulating a definite psychological fact, namely the independence and sovereignty of a certain psychic contents. which express themselves by their power to thwart our will, to obsess our consciousness, and to influence our moods and actions. We may be outraged by the idea of an inexplicable mood, a nervous disorder, or an unconscious, uncontrollable vice being, so to speak, a manifestation of God, but it would be an irreparable loss for religious experience if such things, perhaps even evil things, were artificially segregated from the sum of autonomous psychic contents. It is an apotropaic euphemism, and there's a footnote here, giving a bad thing a good name in order to avert its disfavor. Okay, that's what an apotropaic euphemism is. Okay. To dispose of these things with a nothing but explanation. In that way, they are merely repressed, and as a result, and as a rule, only an apparent advantage is gained, a new twist given to the illusion. The personality is not enriched by it, only impoverished and smothered. What seems evil, or at least meaningless and valueless to contemporary experience and knowledge, might on a higher level of experience and knowledge appear as a source of the best, everything depending naturally on the use one makes of one's seven devils. To explain them as meaningless robots, the personality of its proper shadow, and with this it loses its form. The living form needs deep shadow if it is to appear plastic. Without shadow, it remains a two-dimensional phantom, a more or less well brought up child. So what he's saying here is that we have our dark moments, and those dark moments are not to be washed out of us, but we need to integrate those and understand how and when they can be used, and that's a big issue. I'm going to take a quick moment here to go out and check my email just to make sure I haven't lost somebody along the way here. Yeah, I guess I'm all right. Okay. Coming back. All right. So, one of the things he's saying is, if we attribute something to the will of God, we're simply saying that our ego can't control something, and there's a power beyond the ken of our ego that can get things done, not necessarily us, or not necessarily our ego self, our conscious self. And so we have to sometimes go to the big self that's inside us. Okay, I have a call, so let me see if I can take that. Hello? Yeah. We are. I am on. And didn't you get a message, an email?
No, I only got cancellation notices. Then I don't have any updated coordinates. It says message, see new coordinates from sender, and there's nothing to click on there.
Okay, let me just a sec. If you speak, you're going to go out on YouTube here. But what I'm going to do is quickly send you the coordinates on email. and hopefully we can get something going then.
Sounds good.
Let's see, compose to okay. Thanks for calling me, though. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I just ran in the door right before 6 and
Right.
and I
Okay.
went to register and there was nothing to register.
Right. Okay. So just check your email and see if you've got it now.
It just came through. I'll register and get in.
Pardon?
I'll register and get in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just came through.
All right. Call me back.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
So I obviously somehow made a mistake when I was doing my announcements on this for tonight. And so others didn't get the message. And so Jordan is coming aboard here directly. And I'm sorry for the confusion to our YouTube audience. But we will have it straightened out momentarily. The gist of this, and I just want to tell you this, which YouTube might not want, or Zoom might not want me to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And that is that I've been paying. Okay, you're going to have to unmute, Jordan. I've been paying for a webinar license for the last probably 4 or 5 years, and that has cost me many thousands of dollars over that time. And I just discovered that I do not need that license in order to do the things that we do. And so the result of that is we can do everything on YouTube meetings. Can you hear me now, Jordan?
I can.
Okay, I haven't gotten out the notice about Sundays yet, but I thought I got out the Monday one. I'm going to have to do it again. I see, and so we do have some audience on YouTube, but yesterday or Sunday, without you, I had 72 people on.
Nice.
in the course of the 2 hours. So that was pretty heartening.
Excellent.
It wasn't 72 all at once, but it was 72 people over the 2 hours. And so we are on page 238. And I wonder if you want to read paragraph 400 again. I've just read it, but then maybe we can have an interchange about it.
Okay. Paragraph 400. I hope it has become sufficiently clear to the attentive reader that the self has much to do with the ego as the sun with the earth. They are not interchangeable, nor does it imply a deification of man or dethronement of God. What is beyond our understanding is in any case beyond its reach. When therefore we make use of the concept of a God, we are simply formulating a definite psychological fact, namely the independence and sovereignty of certain psychic contents, which express themselves by their power to thwart our will, to obsess our consciousness, and to influence our moods and actions. We may be outraged at the idea of an inexplicable mood, a nervous disorder, or an uncontrollable vice being, so to speak, a manifestation of God. But it would be an irreparable loss for religious experience if such things, perhaps even evil things, were artificially segregated from the sum of autonomous psychic contents. It is an apopatreic euphemism to dispose of these things with a nothing but explanation. In that way, they are merely repressed, and as a rule, only an apparent advantage is gained. a new twist given to illusion. The personality is not enriched by it, only impoverished and smothered. What seems evil, or at least meaningless and valueless to contemporary experience and knowledge, might, on a higher level of experience and knowledge, appear as the source of the best, everything depending naturally on the use one makes of one's 7 devils. To explain them as meaningless robs the personality of its proper shadow, and with this, it loses its form. The living form needs deep shadow if it is to appear plastic. Without shadow, it remains a two-dimensional phantom, a more or less well-brought-up child.
I love the last sentence there.
Yeah, the child hasn't become the parent of the adult. It's just hanging out going, all right, you're adjusted, but now you're not individuated.
Right. What an amazing week in the news. It's been just all the materials about Queen Elizabeth's funeral. I found it very fascinating. I don't hold allegiance to the king or the queen, but I thought it was very interesting that Jordan Peterson said that there are 4 branches of government in Canada. There's the judiciary, the executive, the legislative, and wait for it, the symbolic. And that's a very interesting way to put it, because that is how we're guided along sometimes, very often. I mean, I go back so far that I can remember very clearly the funeral of JFK, even though I didn't see it in the original because I was living in Japan and they weren't broadcasting internationally at that time. It was in 1963, but it has been very meaningful to me, and even at that time, it was very meaningful to the Japanese, the death of an American president who they felt the loss too. And I remember being in a train a day or two after his death, and there was a photograph of JFK on the cover of the newspaper, and there were people that were actually weeping in that train, all Japanese, and of course I probably was as well at that time. But anyway, so we can go back to God. Or do you have a thought about this?
Well, I think what's interesting is that even the word apotropaic, I think I pronounced it apotropaic, but I mispronounced it, but apotropaic euphemism, that's the supposed ability or power to avert evil or misdeeds. And that would speak to that symbolic 4th branch you're talking about, where in that sense, there's a symbolic branch of government is an apotropaic kind of branch of government, as if somehow with that there and that regal regency, as it were, that might make the symbol of a supposed ability to thwart evil, as if there's a grand protector, as it were.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's kind of like, the pharaohs, empresses, and such, and as if somehow the people were divinely protected because they had this overlord. And that piece of it's kind of ludicrous, because they could get struck by lightning too. I mean, it's like,
well, evil will out, whether we want it to come or not. So
What's your
Yeah.
take on that last piece? A more or less well brought up child. I concur with that. What's your perspective
Well,
there?
if you live, the goody two shoes life, and what's the phrase that we use or have been using over the last 30 years, the politically correct life. If you live the politically correct life, sooner or later, it builds up enough energy to move you into action. And when somebody near you gets moved into action, if you have any inclination in that way, then you're going to get moved into action too. And so, people can go back to my third video on this YouTube channel out of 1300. And we were having a conversation about our former president before he was elected the first time in 2016. This conversation was about this time 6 years ago. And people were saying, what is the attraction of this guy? We don't get it. And the point is that I said, well, look, all of us, or many of us, have been sent to the principal's office for bad behavior at one time or another. And here's a guy who's coming through, and he's saying, yeah, I committed bad behavior and I'm getting away with it. And so people say, yeah, great. And they're going to want to follow that guy, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about here, that, the politically correct, well-behaved child is two-dimensional. And there's a part of you that wants to say, yeah, or, it wants, did you ever have an idea that you might like somebody to be dead for one reason or another? It's a bad thing.
I haven't, but I have approved of several people's funerals quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, the funeral of the Queen, we don't know what her vices were during her lifetime because they were very well veiled. But we know how the shadow popped out in at least one of her sons, Prince Andrew. And, and that didn't just happen out of the clear blue sky. It had to do with, the way people are with one another in the royal family. I mean, the destruction of the marriage of King Charles III and Diana, for example, that happened in the royal family. So there was a shadow element there where people, I don't know, were they jealous of Diana because she was getting more attention than the monarchy? Maybe so. I mean, that could be. And so, one thing leads to another, and all the things that happened to Diana, the bulimia, and even taking up with Dodi Fayed, all those things represent the shadow in the royal family. And they sort of allude to it in the movie The Queen, where I don't remember the actress's name who played the Queen, but you have Prince Philip and the Queen sitting in bed in their apartment, and he's being very dismissive of Diana and so on. And, they aren't appreciating enough the trials that they put her through. And then you see it pop out again with Harry and Meghan. So there's definitely a shadow element going around in that royal household. I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily always the queen, or ever was the queen, maybe, but somebody was stirring the pot in that way. And so we have Prince Andrew that thought it was fine to be with Epstein, and you have other people that are being nasty. And how can people live that way? I mean, that I'm very sympathetic to Meghan, because the same thing happened in the last generation too. So that's the shadow of the royal court there somehow. And in some ways, it's good to have an example that is so elevated, and yet it's still not perfect, right?
And I think you're bringing up, when you bring up the the goody two shoes child, and then when you get the goody two shoes adult, it's interesting when you get a view behind closed doors. Oh, the scandals! Because they've pushed all that stuff. I mean, it's not even discretion. They take the things that are untoward, that aren't just their opinion, that are actually not good for other people, and hide them. And it reminds me of that Winston Churchill interview with someone for his cabinet, and he says, "Well, sir, tell me about your vices." And he's asking a legit question, and it's not about to out the guy. It's about, what does my marketing department need to do for damage control to be ahead of you, and what liquor to stock in the cabinet, or whatever. That's it. It was really a cabinet grocery list he was asking for. And the guy says, "Well, Mr. Churchill, I'm an upstanding, and man, I don't have any," you get the nervousness, and have any vices. He goes, "Oh, either you're lying, or you're actually that boring, and I can have neither of those two qualities in my cabinet."
Right, absolutely. Now, Jyoti has made it here, so I want to ask Jyoti whether did you receive the announcement of the change of venue of this session tonight?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. I did.
Okay, and I did.
I got worried. I said, no, this can't be ending. So I'm so grateful.
No. But how long ago did you receive that? Do you know?
Oh, so I got your notice yesterday. I read it this morning because I missed yesterday. So I read it this morning that there was going to be a change.
Yeah.
And then it said it said something about receiving new coordinates, but it didn't have any attachment. So then I sent you the email saying what happened, and then you sent me the new coordinates.
Oh, okay. So you didn't get the MailChimp email?
No.
There's
I'm wondering
Penelope. Hi, Penelope.
I don't.
I wonder.
I got the cancellation notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if it was a Gmail or other email that wasn't coordinated with MailChimp, because it said "see post for coordinates," and that piece was in a big red banner, but I double clicked on it and it didn't go anywhere. So I wonder if MailChimp had it all set up and somehow the emails scraped it out.
I don't know. I'll have to send a notice out again to the Monday night people. Did you receive something for the advanced reading group though? I haven't done Sunday yet, but did you receive the advanced reading group for Wednesday?
I got that as a cancellation also, and it didn't have the MailChimp little red "see host for" now, and it was the same kind of thing, and it didn't that one didn't have a see host for coordinates, like message from host, see new coordinates or something like that.
Right, right.
But it was just a red banner, like something was supposed to be there. I wonder if it dumped the link. Like it.
Well, let's keep recording for tonight, and we'll send out further announcements to people, because I think I somehow screwed up the MailChimp tonight. But okay, so we'll just do that. All right, so we're reading 401. Here I am alluding to a problem that is far more significant than these few simple words would seem to suggest. Mankind is, in essentials, psychologically still in a state of childhood, a stage that cannot be skipped. The vast majority needs authority, guidance, and law. This fact cannot be overlooked. The Pauline overcoming of the law falls only to the man who knows how to put his soul in the place of his conscience. Very few are capable of this. Many are called, but few are chosen. And these few tread this path only from inner necessity, not to say suffering, for it is sharp at the edge as the edge of a razor. So the point is that, Dr. Jung used to talk about people being at about 10,000 years of development, 10,000 years of people just walking around the street. So there are people walking around the street that are still cavemen, okay, and have the attitudes of cavemen. And then there are some quite refined people, but those quite refined people, as we say, might be politically correct, but they're Mr. Hyde in their private life, or they beat their children or something like that. And so, the fact that we have so much spousal abuse, for example, is just direct evidence of the fact that we don't have the shadow under control, and we don't know what to say to people to get it under control. That's another big part of the problem. Nobody seems to know what to do.
Well, and it's interesting. I wrote in the devil card in my book, I said a lot of people attribute that to addictions, but inhibitions can enslave almost more easily than excesses, because they hide and live in blind spots. And I think back to that goody two shoes kids and adults you brought up before, it's that what I wrote down in the margin, they hide their vices behind closed doors from others and from themselves and their experience by inaction from inhibitions. Mm-hmm. So yet either they aren't able to act out what someone else considers. And here's the thing: we have to ask the question, what's a vice? Is it something that's harming? Is something that's illegal? And then what's legal? And I mean, there's a whole mess of, as you know, how to dial out the diagram of that word. But I think it's that what's hidden behind closed doors vices, that's external. And what's hidden by inhibitions inside. And that goes with, that philosophical sentimentality and intellectual bogey, he says, mm-hmm. or philosophical sentimentality. It's as if I make enough sense on the outside, then I'm, beyond reproach on the inside. And that outside sense doesn't really lend any credibility or incredulous qualities to the inside. Mm-hmm. It's just this persona. It's just a surface. And what I find is if the surface is generated by the substance, cool. That's an unapologetic, unthreatened person who, maybe vices to someone else, but they're like, well, this is, this gives me joy. It's something that, so I think there's that semantic piece of it too.
Yeah. Penelope says a vice is something that damages oneself or others.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it.
Yeah, so the whole doing harm piece, but if it's not doing harm, then it's just a matter of opinion. So I like that, then that's, then that's that. But I like Penelope's piece of, it's the piece of doing harm to self or other.
Right. Okay, so we'll go on. 402, the conception of God as an autonomous psychic content makes God into a moral problem. That, admittedly, is very uncomfortable. But if this problem does not exist, God is not real, for nowhere can he touch our lives. He is then either an historical and intellectual bogey or a philosophical sentimentality. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's as historical and intellectual bogey, what do you think he's saying there?
A fraud. I mean, someone's stuck in the head. The heart of the matter is probably systematically pounded out of the statements. And I guess, like I said to someone weeks ago, when they went, it was like a Jungian paragraph in one sentence, but it was all philosophical. And all I could really hear was if P then Q, and if only A then B, and it basically was like a big geometric proof. And at the end, I said, everything you just said made way too much sense to be worth a damn.
Well,
you didn't have the heart of the matter in it. So I think the intellectual bogey, besides the intellectual bogey, if I go to golf terms, it didn't make par. It's subpar, but not like birdie subpar. It's too many strokes to get to what's actually the thought.
Right. Well, yesterday I read in answer to Job this paragraph that I love, where Jung is pointing out that he does not speak in psychologisms. In other words, he doesn't explain away things by, oh, well, that's nothing but this. That's not,
right.
If you describe it that way, you try to explain it away, which is what the Enlightenment did. But what the Enlightenment did was actually create an endarkenment, because you can't explain away many of these phenomena. And so here's what he says.
Right before you do, I think, to speak directly to that, I think it was Jung who said, "Do not be misled about someone else's diagnosis of you."
Right, fair enough.
Because it was it was you. You're the only one who has a handle on you. And if someone, say, medicates before they investigate, or they pin this diagnosis, and then it's like, oh heck, I have that. Well, no, you don't. That's just the piece from the book that goes on the insurance coding line. And so it had nothing to do potentially with the actual overall complexity of the psychological state.
Yeah, I described this in reference to my art. I'm going to do it two ways. In reference to my art, I was once taking this portrait class, painting in pastels. And so there was a person that was having his portrait painted by everybody in the class, right? The teacher comes up behind me and says, well, you have to do this and you have to do this. And I just looked over at her and said, no, I don't.
Right.
Get out of my face. I took the wrong class here, obviously. And
that's
so
a great example, though, because I went to the Art Students League in Denver twice. And the second time, it wasn't the substitute teacher or, guide. It was the normal one. And he's all about, you have to paint in shapes, don't delineate. And I'm like, okay, I get that from architecture. But he comes around, he's like, now, where are your brushes? I said, oh, no, I paint with my fingers. And he's like, well, how can you do an eye? And I, like that. And it had the sparkle and there it was. And he went, I prefer if you don't come back. Because, he couldn't say no. I mean, but like it was the same thing. Like, you can't do. What do you mean? I already did.
Yeah.
I have to do that.
Right. And I never touch an oil painting with a brush. I only use a palette knife. And I
But I
only,
think that may be similar to me, because I'd used the really thick 5mm silk screen gloves, so I didn't, play the Van Gogh game of holding the brushes in my mouth and getting lead poisoning and chromium and all that. Because that's one of the things along with syphilis that got him, is he was
Right.
actually in his pain. Pigment's highly toxic, but
right.
but there's this tactile piece that with a spatula, or even I'd pick up a piece of cardboard with a palette knife, a spatula, or your hands, it's like a drumstick that's attached to you. You feel it. Whereas with a brush, the force is resolved out of the brush. You don't feel it so much up the handle of the brush. So at the palette knife, impasto, hands, I think there's a real Eros piece of how you're touching the canvas, that you literally feel the paint you're moving. Whereas a brush, I think, dilutes the intensity of the connection.
Didn't you just love finger painting when you were in kindergarten or first grade, and then they just drove all that out of you?
Well, what's funny is after college, when I said I'm going to go somewhere after architecture school, I'm going to go somewhere I've never been, to do something I've never done. First canvas, first painting in Denver, and I'm going like this with the brush. This, it's like, here's the brush, and I just couldn't touch. I just couldn't bring it to touch. And I looked at it, and it's just like an architecture. I'm like, oh, this doesn't work. And I tossed it over my shoulder and went right in with my hands. And but I got that before it was beaten out. I just went, this is something. Oh, this is toss.
Right. And so Jung is talking about in answer to Job, paragraph 750. I love this scene because he quotes a couple of lines from Faust that are just wonderful in this way. So he says, well, okay, I'll just read a part of this. He says, my attempt is based on the psychological experience I have harvested during the course of a long life. I do not underestimate the psyche in any respect whatsoever, nor do I imagine for a moment that psychic happenings vanish into thin air by being explained. Psychologism represents a still primitive mode of magical thinking, with the help of which one hopes to conjure the reality of the soul out of existence after the manner of the Practophantasmist in Faust. Are you still here? Nay, it's a thing unheard. Vanish at once. We've said the enlightening word.
Yeah.
So it's like that teacher of mine, she would have enlightened me to make a more perfect rectangle or a better eye or whatever it was in her idea of beauty, and it wouldn't have been my painting then, it would have been hers. So anyway.
Well, I think too, to speak, I think I have a little more, to say about the intellectual bogey and the philosophical sentimentality. Intellectual bogey, if I keep with the golf metaphor, that's missing, that's passing by the point, the hole in golf, too many times, over and over and over, and just ad infinitum, ad nauseam, trying to intellectually explain it. And then the philosophical sentimentality I wrote in the margin goes on and on and on and on intellectually about the good old days, pining on and on and on about philosopher this and philosopher that. And it's name dropping, and it's not experiential. And it really just goes to show, great, glad you have that much reading comprehension from the class, but you didn't comprehend any of it.
Yeah, that's right. So going on to 403.
Yep.
You want to read it? Go ahead.
Sure. If we leave the idea of, in quotes, divinity quite out of account and speak only of, in quotes, autonomous contents, we maintain a position that is intellectually and empirically correct, but we silence a note which, psychologically, should not be missing. By using the concept of a divine being, we give apt expression to the peculiar way in which we experience the workings of these autonomous contents. We could also use the term, in quotes, demonic, D-A-E-M-O-N-I-C, provided that this does not imply that we are still holding up our sleeves some concretized God who conforms exactly to our wishes and ideas. Our intellectual conjuring tricks do not help us to make a reality of the God we desire, any more than the world accommodates itself to our expectations. Therefore, by affixing the attribute, in quotes, divine, to the workings of autonomous contents, we are admitting their relatively superior force. And it is this superior force which has at all times constrained men to ponder the inconceivable and even to impose the greatest sufferings upon themselves in order to give these workings their due. It is a force as real as hunger and the fear of death.
Right. I think the essence of this paragraph, which we need to keep before our eyes, is the idea of autonomous complexes. Okay, so these are parts of our psyche that are autonomous. You can't think them out of existence. You also can't think them into existence. They march to their own drum. And so when an autonomous complex hits you, then boy, it has to be dealt with somehow. And
it does. I think, and that brings, I mean, this whole suffering, the greatest sufferings upon themselves. The monks who wore the hair shirts that just abraded and scratched, made their skin bleed, as some suffering on the path to God. To me, in contrast with, say, what Lewis Carroll said, it's important to try and believe a couple of impossible things before breakfast every morning. And, and then we have Alice in Wonderland, so the difference between Alice in Wonderland and a hair shirt, I think they both apply, but it's just how you're going to go about suffering.
I mean, for me, my autonomous complex for the longest time and until fairly recently was my anima, because my anima would latch on to a woman that I bumped into accidentally one way or another, and all of a sudden, it's like there would be like a tunnel between me and that woman. And, we're just talking to one another, and heck with anybody else. We're, and that actually happened to me. And I think the fifth video I did, fifth lesson that I did in this reading group of a Monday night, where this beautiful psychotherapist comes in. And what is she? She's a sex therapist. And she made a huge amount of money by telling women that it was okay to enjoy sex, basically. And so she walks in the room and she's got this long hair, like all of my anima figures. And I just go, bah! And all of a sudden there's this tunnel between the two of us, and we can't pay attention to or talk to anybody else because we can't even see them. We're in this tunnel, and they're on the outside of this tunnel, and wow, zing, 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 zing. Lots of things happen in a short period of time there, but I think fortunately for me, she moved away And because we went outside that night or within a few days, and I realized she's driving this red Porsche 944, really beautiful automobile. And I go, oh my God, this woman, she's a psychologist, and all these things. But I had to, grab myself by the throat and say, wait a minute, Skip, this is your anima talking. But it definitely was autonomous, and it definitely,
Well, also
very, very powerful.
animal and libido. I mean, some people have that effect on people. I mean, it's just, some people are, incredibly immaculately beautiful, and I don't bat an eye. And there's some people that, actually, all of a sudden, there's a magnet on your nose, it just kind of pulls you across the view screen.
Mhm.
I mean, it's,
So,
I don't know.
yeah. So anyway, what I think is important here in this paragraph, this segment, is that we have to recognize that there are these autonomous complexes that can get control of us, and we have to recognize when it's happening, and otherwise you can really screw up your life horrifically.
But I
Okay.
think it's important that last sentence. It is a force as real as hunger and the fear of death. And
Right.
so, you can't just like stop eating and expect any good to happen,
That's right.
I mean, you can go a while, but I mean, even Gandhi kind of was on the verge of death after that whole hunger strike. And, but the fear of death, the force as real as hunger, that these autonomous complexes are as real as basically the autonomous functions of how your heart continues to beat, how if you pass out, you start to breathe. I mean, it's not a physical, I'm going to do this kind of activity. It's literally, it's autonomous.
Yep. Okay, so paragraph 404, the self could be characterized as a kind of compensation of the conflict between inside and outside. This formulation would not be unfitting, since the self has somewhat the character of a result of a goal attained, something that has come to pass very gradually and is experienced with much travail. So too the self is our life's goal, for it is the completest expression of that fateful combination we call individuality, the full flowering not only of the single individual, but of the group, in which each adds his portion to the whole.
Yeah, that goes back to, the compensation of conflict between inside and outside. And there comes a point in life when they're not in conflict anymore. The dynamic tension is what keeps the binary group pair of them in orbit always. And the way I like to look at that is, if you take just the yin yang symbol and you put it in motion, start it spinning. But now I go so far into the dark, I hit the white dot, and that wormholes me all the way around on another axis to the black dot. And I go so far into the light as to find the black dot. So I like to see this orbit between the dots as it's spinning. And I think that that's healthy. It's just that I think early on, with the goody two shoes, as you mentioned, it's trying to be bright, trying to be light, fit, finish, and polish. I have to be presentable. And basically, in short, that's just, please don't throw me in the briar patch. I don't want to be in trouble. And the reality is that's childish and not childlike. So it has the connection. But in that sense, that's where I go to Peter Pan, where I think Peter Pan is the enemy. He's the one who abducted children. Captain Hook didn't touch any children.
Yeah.
And I think Peter Pan is looking in the psychological mirror when he sees Captain Hook. And Captain Hook is a symbol of what it looks like to go out in life and get beat up and dropped 8 times, get up 9.
Yeah, I think that's a great statement, actually.
And I thought into that a while, and okay, I get the hook. Okay, he lost a hand. Okay, scar of life. He loses a leg below the knee. He loses a leg, gets a peg, and then I'm like, okay, those fit. But what's up with this pirates and the patches thing? What about that job description makes so many pirates just every time a rope snaps, they lean over and just the right spot to get their eye whipped out.
Yeah.
And it's always seemingly their stronger eye. So I looked into it. Well, the pirate patch is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
The only pirates who wear the patch are the ones who work on deck and below deck. And as they're going below deck, they move the patch over. That eye is already adjusted to the dark. So they don't trip over things. They're not in danger as much. But so there's, 2 real pieces, the hook and the leg, that are part of, adult scarring, as it were. That's different than the purity of Peter Pan. But the patches, then I also found this very clever tool that makes my job that much more effective, the patch.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking about the yin yang symbol, okay, everybody thinks about yin yang this way, which is, male and female make the world go round, bada bee, bada ba, right? And then you have to realize that the real symbol is a bit more like this, like that,
right?
Where, there are many things in each side and they're counterparts of one another, right? And so here you have sushi rolls here, and here you have sushi rolls here. But even that doesn't adequately describe it, because I want you to keep in mind that this image, but then overlay it over the following one, which is, let's see here, it's this one. Okay, which is things go down deeper and deeper, these opposites, and they do cause the world to go around. And, they get so small that they go out of sight. So you can sort of see it sort of disappear in the smallest yin and the smallest yang. But the point is, each one of those has its own layer or dimension of all the other things in it, and much more, actually. I mean, obviously.
Do they go infinitely out and infinitely in?
Yep.
And actually, if you would you go back to the previous one? Something I just came to mind, just picturing it. See if I misremembered the visual.
This one?
Yeah. Because also, look, the circle on the light side, the circle is implied. It's not actually present. So the light is infinite. And then the dark is oceanic. It's contained in that paisley piece. So there's the psyche is inside. The light is numinous outside. It enters through the cracks, so to speak, or the eyes, as it were. But it's interesting that the black there, because of its darkness, it itself is its own container and what is contained, but the light is not contained. It's just grouped near that place.
Yeah.
Everything, there's no circular line all the way around. So I hadn't noticed that when you showed that before, but I just noticed it tonight, where that's even appropriate, in that the light doesn't need a boundary, but the shadow has an identity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So why don't you go ahead and read
405.
I think I just read. So read 405. We only have 2 more paragraphs, folks, for this week. And then actually we're at that point at the end of the book proper. However, there is about 100 pages of appendices here, and in the black books I've ended up finding a whole bunch of references to to these appendices in the back of this book, so we're going to have to go through those as well. But
Yeah, I like it when Jung doesn't give his books an appendectomy because
right, okay, so you're going to do 405.
405. Sensing the self as something irrational, as an indefinable existent, to which the ego is neither opposed nor subjected, but merely attached, and about which it revolves very much as the earth revolves around the sun. Thus we come to the goal of individuation. I use the word in quotes, sensing, in order to indicate the aperceptive character of the relation between ego and self. In this relation, nothing is knowable, because we can say nothing about the contents of the self. The ego is the only content of the self that we do know. The individuated ego senses itself as the object of an unknown and supraordinate subject. It seems to me that our psychological inquiry must come to a stop here, for the idea of a self is itself a transcendental postulate, which, although justifiably psychological, does not allow of scientific proof. This step beyond science is an unconditional requirement of the psychological development I have sought to depict, because without this postulate, I could give no adequate formulation of the psychic processes that occur empirically. At the very least, therefore, the self can claim the value of an hypothesis analogous to that of the structure of the atom. And even though we should once again be enmeshed in an image, it is nonetheless powerfully alive, and its interpretation quite exceeds my powers. I have no doubt at all that it is an image, but one in which we are contained.
Yeah.
Which is like the picture you just showed.
Right. So the point being that our ego is contained within the container of the self.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part. And as such, since it may not be conscious of its environment, is there any hope? Yeah, I guess there's hope somehow, but it's hope in recognizing these things as they come up autonomously, and not the kind of hope that you get out of a diagnosis and here are your pills today.
No, right. And I think that, but one in which we are contained, that container, then the perceivable object is the ego. So hence the importance of ego strength. And in some, I think it was in either alchemical studies or there were 3 or 4 volumes where if you searched for incidents of words, you would see basically self as container and contained at one and the same time.
Right.
And in that, I think that goes back to the yin yang symbol, that where the side on the light side didn't need the guideline of the circular boundary. It had no boundary, whereas the other part was contained.
Mm-hmm. And actually, our psyche is not is open in that way. It's open in the way of the light side. In other words,
an endless ocean within.
Yeah. Okay, 406. I am deeply conscious that in this essay I have made no ordinary demands on the understanding of my reader. Though I have done my utmost to smooth the path of understanding, there is one great difficulty which I could not eliminate, namely the fact that the experiences which form the basis of my discussion are unknown to most people and are bound to seem strange. Consequently, I cannot expect my readers to follow all of my conclusions, although every author naturally prefers to be understood by his public, yet the interpretations of my observations is of less moment to me than the disclosure of a wide field of experience at present hardly explored, which it is the aim of this book to bring within reach of many. In this field, hitherto so dark, it seems to me that there lie the answers to many riddles which the psychology of consciousness has never even approached. I would not pretend to have formulated these answers with any degree of finality. I shall therefore be well satisfied if my essay may be counted as a tentative attempt at an answer.
Well, and I love the humility there, which is basically it's a subtle call to the reader to, what do you think? You know?
Yeah, that's right. And
come talk to me. I haven't been able to figure this out.
As with Jung and everything that he wrote, why write it in 100 words when you can write it in 2,000 words?
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's like, oh my God, the black books actually have some stuff in them that's important, right? Because what happened? The red book came out, and Sona Shamdasani said that the black books are the basis of the red book. Mm-hmm. And so all of us are scratching our heads saying, well, what the heck does that mean? And why do we need the black books then? And then he publishes the black books, and there's 7 volumes, but about 2/3 of them are actually photocopies of the German black books in the German language. So, you're not going to have them on your shelf for that. And so there are translations in the back of each of these books in English. Excuse me a moment. Saved you from that one.
Bless you.
Okay, so anyway, but now I started to read the black books about 3 months ago, and oh my God, there's huge amounts that are in there that were never mentioned in the red book. And I found one sentence that just can turn all religion on its ear. But I first have to get somebody to pay attention to me.
Right, well, yeah, totally. And it's interesting. Someone, once mentioned to me, well, can't Jung be more concise? And I said, well, first off, you're asking the wrong person.
Yeah, that's right.
Me and the Blue Mile can talk together for miles and miles and miles. I said, but the thing is, to me, the Jungian paragraph, which is, an idea, or the Jungian tome, each volume, you can only jump in mud puddles so many times before, okay, I'm going to go in and clean up. Whereas you can dive in the pool or the ocean and swim all day long. So why not make it bigger?
Yeah. So what I learned is that I am not fast. Okay. I have a diesel heart, which means that it goes bum, right. And it's not one that goes like that. Yeah. So I'm not designed to be a sprinter, right? I need a long distance in order to make the sprinters just die, right? They'll die in the race. But meanwhile, my diesel heart just goes ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And
well, that reminds me of my dad, actually. I remember he said something, and it was one of those beautiful insults. It's like you're gonna try to remember that for as long as possible, because if I ever get to use that, wow, that was a doozy. But he said it's just the right wrong guy, and turned around, and it looked like there was gonna come to blows. And the guy, he was red in the face, and my dad said, "Oh, hold on. I have a better idea. Let's you and I just go take a run. We can go slow, and let's just keep going and see who drops first."
Yeah.
And that's that diesel heart. Whereas, I'm the sprinter. My problem is I have to be mindful that I don't, oh, wow, I'm 500 feet past the cliff ledge. And I hope I get a better, deal on a parachute on the way down, because it's like.
Right. So my point was that I have taken on the study of Jung as a diesel heart guy, a guy that can go if not the marathon, at least the half marathon. And I once at Quantico ran 14 miles double time in full combat gear. That's non-trivial task. You have about 70 pounds of gear, 70 pounds of gear, and you have to go 14 miles. And I guess it took about 2 hours or something like that. But that's for the whole platoon to get to the other end of the line together, right? And so I know I can go a long way, and so I take on these readings in that way. I don't just go through and speed read or try to quickly get through something like a novel. I might read a novel fairly fast. But with Jung, I try to read every sentence very carefully. What is he trying to say? And then when I'm looking at the black books, Shamdasani's put all these footnotes in saying, oh, he didn't say that in the black book, or he changed this to this in the black book or the red book. And you go, oh my God. So, we've all been misled since 2009, since the Red Book came out, because we, even with the Red Book translated, which is to Shamdasani's great credit, no doubt, you don't have enough to make correct assessment of what he's trying to say, because he was actually saying something much deeper than what comes across. And
that's, I think, why I appreciate these sessions so much, is because we go paragraph by paragraph. Because I guess about probably 2014, shut the architecture firm down. I mean, that's probably the last time I sped read anything, because it's, when you're writing.
What burned down?
No, when I shut down the architecture firm,
okay, yeah.
2014,
Right.
I didn't have to write specs anymore. And if you get a big enough commercial project, the spec book is 200 to 300 pages long.
Yeah.
So you're writing that plus the drawings, etc. And the night before, to read through 300 pages twice for proofreading,
Right.
while you're exhausted. I was glad as a kid I took this 12-week speed reading course, because there was, I think at a point, 1,562 words a minute with 96% comprehension, which meant a 400-page book in just over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I saw Stephen Wright, the comedian, and he goes, yeah, I was speed reading one day. It was a used book. I came up on a big bookmark and got, boom, thrown across the room into the wall, like it was some, huge speed bump at highway speed.
Yeah.
But I found that when I started reading slower, not only did I enjoy it more, it's steeped in. And even if I was going deep, going faster, it's just more resistance underwater, so to speak.
Right.
And, it stopped being, I said it stopped being the show pony.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no, don't worry, it's only 200 pages. It's like, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I am finding many new ideas in the black books that were never written down anywhere else. They never appeared elsewhere. But you have to have the patience to do the comparisons and so on. And so, Jordan, are you coming back? I sort of wanted to sign off for tonight. I was up quite late.
Yeah, I was just closing the
last
window.
night.
There must be something in the backyard. The dogs are going ape.
Well, I want
next
to make a pitch for something that I found for people to do, okay? Because there are a lot of us out there that can do this, and I'm starting to do it. And that is substitute teach. Because I'm finding that the school systems are desperate to have a warm body in the place. And in my school district, you don't even have to have a college degree. You only need 48 credit hours. So that's like a little bit more than halfway through your sophomore year of college. And you can be a substitute teacher. And so it is something that a lot of people who are at home wool gathering could actually step up and do. And so I'm going to have my first day of it tomorrow. That's going to be some kind of an experience, and I'm doing art classes at 3 levels: elementary, middle school, and high school. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that works out.
Well, I second the substitute or teaching piece. In college, we had a pilot program called Architects in Schools, and I taught architecture to third graders for a year. And I laughed at the end, and they asked me to write a review of what I thought. And I said, well, maybe all my colleagues at school should come and sit around the room and listen to these kids, because these kids are better than we are. Because
way better.
Yeah, third grade, I felt at home, but it felt like they were still all connected, but old and like to the imaginal, but old enough to intellectually handle the concepts and deal with, bigger words and such.
Yeah.
And also their sense of humor was nuts. I mean, I remember I asked them to to design, it was a space hotel,
Mm-hmm.
like for outer space travelers to stop at the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 days later, I come back for the next class, and they said, we think that idea is small.
And so what did they want to do?
They said, if we're going to do a hotel, we might as well go ahead and put it a little further out, and we make a whole planet. And they had made a planet, and it had ATMs and schools, but the schools had an X with a circle on them because they didn't want to go to school because they're on outer space. And they had McDonald's, and they had ATMs, and they had little hotels on the Planet Hotel, and they had parks, and they had rivers and bicycles and ice cream and popcorn and movies, and then I was like, wow, this hotel, Planet Hotel they made, it's a list of all the good things people should not stop doing in their lives.
Right.
And I just, the wisdom of, right then, it was when someone said out of the mouths of babes,
Yeah.
The wisdom, I would say, that was not a lucky lightning strike. They should get some credit for that. They're still connected. They just don't say those things as often because they're played to keep the gas tank full.
Right.
And I think kids need teachers. I mean, the lineage piece and the teachers are being just squished in terms of pay. The actual teachers and so yeah.
Well, it's actually not awful anymore. The pay, it's not awful, and for a substitute teacher, you can do pretty okay these days, especially if you. Pardon?
Good for you for doing that. I mean,
yeah. Well, I cooked up a lesson with Colleen that
I was going to ask, are these kids going to get good stuff? It's like, yep.
And so we're going to see how that goes, but I'm going to teach them the doodle.
I'm looking forward to seeing my kids draw a straight line. Now draw a line that does not like straight lines.
Right. Now I draw a line that is laughing.
Yeah. Draw a line that is laughing. They'll kind of look up. Oh.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, Colleen says that the younger kids don't have any hesitation.
At all.
They already know what it is that you want and they do it. Right. But older kids have to think about it. Right.
Well, right when you said that, I picked up my pen to do that, and I started just grinning. But I caught myself and went, "Wow, those third graders would have called me out." Like, you had to think about it a second, didn't you? And well, you're already all halfway through. And
So anyway, it's going to be an adventure. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to call it quits here for tonight because
we can start on the non-appendectomy land next time.
I got up early to watch the Queen's funeral, and I'm glad I did. But it was a sort of a sweet moment in life, right? Not that the Queen's death is sweet, but we all knew she was going to die sooner or later, and probably sooner. And so
Keith Richards' dating pool just disappeared.
What's that?
Keith Richards' dating pool just disappeared. That Rolling Stones guitarist.
I'm not getting you.
Keith Richards, his dating pool.
Oh, okay, Keith Richards. Okay.
I saw the pictures of him holding a little baby when he was like 35 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Queen Elizabeth, and he goes, "Oh, she's so cute." It's like, like at the end of time, the two people on the dating pool would be Queen Elizabeth and Keith Richards.
I see.
Just keep going and going and going.
Yep. Well, they're definitely going to be going and going and going. It's amazing how many royals there are, but they're. If you think of your own family as a family of royals, then you got a lot of them out there one way or another. And, they don't have to be related to you by blood,
right,
as I've been finding. So anyway, let's say goodnight, and we'll go into these appendices next week, which the topic, I guess I should say the topic. The topic is new paths in psychology. That should be good, since he's telling us what the new paths are in the 19 teens. And then the next part of it is the structure of the unconscious. Sounds good. Those are the two main parts, I guess. So new paths in psychology and the structure of the unconscious. So we can't pass those up. Have to finish them. And so we'll see you. I'll see you on Wednesday. I did send out a notice to everybody. I'm going to have to send another one.
Okay.
Tomorrow with the coordinates for the advanced reading group, and then
Answer to Joe one other.
Yeah, I haven't done
All right.
that one yet. So anyway, peace.
Have
Take
a
care.
great day.
Good night,
Peace.
everyone. We'll see you soon. See you.
See you, Jokey. Thanks for.
if
Good
not
night.
before.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Joe.